Hi, I'm Adam Robert Lewis, and you're listening to Brewing Actors Podcast, my chance to talk to actors, to hear their stories, what inspired their performances, and what decisions or relationships influenced their work. On today's episode.
You see, I think that's where the Eisteddfod platform helped enormously, because one day...
All the way back when you were 5.
Absolutely, when you were 5. You know, you can go... And I went to Eisteddfod the length and breadth of Wales. My father didn't think twice about taking me anywhere to sing. And some adjudicators really liked my voice and gave me first prize. Others were not that keen, and I didn't win. You have to learn to take rejection.
My guest today is Philip Griffiths, a fellow Welshman who grew up in mid-Wales. Philip spent most of his youth in and out of local eisteddfods, giving him a taste for life on the stage. Moving away from rural Wales, Philip trained in opera at Manchester University. He then joined his first opera company, Glyndebourne. Philip talks about his early career in opera and the crossroads which led him to musical theatre. I caught up with Philip at home in Lewis. This podcast is presented in 2 parts. So, like any story, we have to start at the very beginning. This is episode 4, part 1 of Brewing Actors Podcast.
My name is Philip Griffiths. I was born at the Moat Farm in Caersws, Sir Drefaldwyn, and my mother and father were farmers.
Were your parents a big influence to you at a young age in terms of going into this industry?
Not so much going into the industry. They were very encouraging about singing, because being Welsh, everybody sings.
Yeah.
And from a very early age, I was encouraged to sing. My first eisteddfod was in Llanwnog, in Caersws, the village of Caersws, and I was 5.
Right. Did your parents compete in eisteddfods when they were younger, or...?
Well, my mother and father loved going to eisteddfods, not necessarily to compete. My mother used to sing in choirs. She belonged to 2 or 3 choirs. But they never competed solo stuff, no. I think my father would have liked to, but he hadn't got the nerve.
Right.
But I started to sing when I was 5. My first eisteddfod was at 5, singing a little hymn called A Little Pilgrim on Life's Way. And I forgot my words. And the adjudicator was a guy called William Gwalchmai Jones from Llanerville. And he said, "Never mind, Philip, you sit down and we'll have another go." So I had to wait till everybody else had done it. By this time, I'd heard everybody else singing it, so I got the words right, and I won the competition.
Were your parents in the audience?
Oh, yes.
Right.
Absolutely. My mother was sitting there on tenterhooks, because the children all had to come up and sit around the stage.
Right.
And watching each other doing it. It was, when I think about it, it was quite nerve-wracking.
Did you compete against kids in your school?
Yes.
Or was it people from all over?
Well, yes, children from school, but yes, they were coming from all over the place, because that was the entertainment in those days. And we were talking about, I was 5, so that was 1953.
And was that a local eisteddfod, or was it, because there's the national eisteddfod, was that running at that time?
Oh, yes, absolutely. But I only competed in the national eisteddfod once, and I was so put off by it, I didn't bother again.
Right. So you won, so you were 5?
Yes, I was 1.
And you won the Unawd Cerdant?
Yes.
Right.
Under 5.
Under 5.
With a silver cup, which I've got in the cupboard.
Right.
Yes, so that was that.
Your mother and father, they ran a farm, or your father. Mm-hmm. So were they keen for you to take over the farm? Was that an option?
That was the idea.
That was the idea.
But you see, the only things I was interested in was music and horses.
Right.
And my father said horses don't pay, and music, we know nothing about it at all. I mean, my father was asked after I'd gone into the business, what does Philip do for a living? Nobody understands that you actually can make a living from it.
Right. So all the local people in that village, I guess, none of them did performing arts or arts, any related job. It was all agricultural.
Absolutely.
Right.
Yeah. It's a very rural part of Wales, Montgomeryshire. There is industry there. I mean, there was a lot of industry at Newtown at one time, but of course a lot of it has gone. The tanneries and things like that have gone. But no, mainly farming.
Right. So what was the step for you to go away and train? What was did have you got brothers and sisters?
I've got one brother, but he's not at all interested in music at all.
Right. Did he go to university? Was that even something you did then?
No. My brother, his intention was to go home to the farm to work with my father. But we had not a because the farm was not ours. We were tenants. And the landlord, when he heard that Tom, my brother, was going to come home to work with my father, he was going to put the rent up because he said, well, there's two people going to be making a living from this, which was ridiculous. So my father said, I'm not going to do that. So he sold up and he went as a farm manager for years, which was much better for him, actually. But no, my brother didn't want to go into it if that was the case.
So you had the singing lessons with the adjudicator, right? Became your
well,
first...
eventually, yes.
Eventually.
I'd had other singing teachers. A guy called Redver Sewellyn, who was the head of singing at Aberystwyth University. And he used to come to Newtown on a Saturday. And I was chosen to have singing lessons with him. And he wanted me to go...
Did you have to pay, or was it...
No, the education was all paid for by the county.
By the local authority?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And even when I went to Manchester, that was all paid by the local authority as well.
That would never happen now.
No, absolutely not.
So you felt very supported from a young age in terms of singing lessons. One singing lesson a week?
Oh, no, two.
Two?
At least two.
Right.
Yeah, at least two.
And what were you covering? What was the sort of lessons like?
Well, the idea, going to Manchester was the place to go.
Right.
For
and how did
singers.
you become aware of Manchester?
Because this Gwilym Gwalchmai was adjudicating in Llanfairpwllgwyngyll, as I said. And a guy called Royden Jones, who worked on our neighbour's farm, he was asked if he wanted to go to Manchester. Now, he was a lot older than me, and he went and came back to visit us and told us all about it. And I was absolutely fascinated.
And he studied singing?
Yeah, studied singing. And he did a couple of professional jobs, but not very many. But he came back to tell us all about it. And I was absolutely fascinated. So my father and I came back from chapel one Sunday, and I asked him if he would ring Gwilym up to ask if he would come and hear me to see if I was good enough to go to Manchester. So we came over. My mother, she made such a fuss about dinner that night and everything. It was ham salad and egg on the top and all that sort of thing. It was really, putting the boat out. Anyway, he came and he played for me to sing. I sang Where I Walk by Handel. And he said, yes, I think you should be all right. But Mr. Cox, Freddie Cox, who was the principal at the college, will have to hear you. But I was a lot younger than anybody else. I was only 17. He tried to put me off, but I wasn't having any of it. I insisted.
It tried to put you off saying
wait a year, wait a couple of years.
I see.
You're only 17, you're a tenor.
What, for your voice to mature?
That's right. And the tenor voice is always the last to mature.
Right.
Because of the height of the notes and all that sort of stuff, the support you need to support the voice. Anyway, I wasn't having any of it. I went and Gwilym was my singing teacher there.
So you went to Manchester?
Yeah, I went to Manchester.
Didn't you think of maybe training locally, like the Royal Welsh College? Was that...
Well, in those days, I mean, this is something that I have a bit of a bone about. I don't speak fluent Welsh.
Right. Was Welsh something that was spoken in your house when you were younger?
My father was first language Welsh. Right. My mother was Welsh born, but was English speaking, although she understood it and she sang in Welsh. But the part of Wales she came from, which was Abermule on the Montgomeryshire-Shropshire border, and my father was from Cardiganshire, was all Welsh. So we had mainly English in the house.
Right.
Welsh in school was a subject. We weren't...
Right. You spoke English at school.
Yes,
you
absolutely.
didn't speak Welsh.
No. We weren't tutored in Welsh, although there was a Welsh lesson, but we weren't tutored in it.
Were there Welsh schools? Because obviously I went to a fluent Welsh school, so all the subjects were in Welsh. Science, maths, everything. Were there schools like that in your area?
I think there were, but Llanfairpwllgwyngyll was one place that I think was an all-Welsh-speaking school. Right. But, of course, Newtown wasn't. There were so many English...
So you just went on what the influence of the house was. English was the language,
yes.
So you never even thought about going to a Welsh school.
Although I spoke more Welsh when I was at home because I was hearing it all the time.
Yeah, of course.
Because my father used to talk Welsh to his brothers and his cousins and his uncles and all the rest of it. All Welsh. It was only Welsh in the house because my mother couldn't converse properly. But I wish in a way that I had kept it up. But, I moved away at 17 and haven't been back since.
So the Royal Welsh at that time wasn't an option. It wasn't something you were aware of? Because now it's quite prestigious.
Yes,
and you think...
it wasn't in those days.
Right.
We're talking about 1966 here, when I went to Manchester. Manchester was the place to go. Now, this Gwilym Gwalchmai used to adjudicate all over Wales. And when I got to Manchester, there were several singers that had come from the Eisteddfod platform, a lot older, but they all were poached to come to Manchester by Gwilym.
Right. So when you got to Manchester, the local authority paid for you to go. So how does that work? Do you have to apply?
Yes, my father had to do all sorts of figures. You had to show the accounts of the farm and everything to show that you couldn't afford to do it yourself.
Right.
And
would you have, had you not had that grant from the local authority, do you think you would have gone?
I would have found some way of going, yes. I wasn't going to be put off.
Right.
Because, I just wanted to do it. And, you don't know what drives you sometimes. And I really don't know what drove me for this.
To Manchester?
Yeah, absolutely. And to go into this singing profession.
So you left at 16, 17 to go to Manchester. And how long was the course at Manchester?
Well, I did 4 years. It was a performers and teachers course. It was a 4-year course. I did an extra year because I was so young. And the Education Authority gave me this extra year to do.
What type of things do they cover? So the usual acting?
Well, yeah, I mean, because I was doing a teacher's course, I had to do all sorts of harmony and
So was the teacher course sort of an additional element that if you didn't work in the industry, you could maybe then go and teach?
That's right.
Was that the plan?
Absolutely, that was the plan, exactly. I mean, I'd have been quite happy just doing the performers.
Right.
But, of course, the Education Authority wanted me to do both.
Right.
So you have to go along with that because actually, at the end of the day, they're paying everything. And
How were your parents, when you said I'm off to Manchester? Were they intrigued?
They were. I mean, you could almost feel that. What? I mean, why? I mean, when we left, I hadn't got anywhere to live in Manchester, so my father went with Gwilym one day to Manchester to find me somewhere to stay, to live to get digs, and we found a place in Didsbury, and I'd never been out of Wales, and we were going down from the Chester dual carriageway into Manchester, and I thought we were on the motorway. And we were looking for Didsbury. We got totally lost. We ended up in Moss Side, which is a pretty rough area. And we stopped to ask this policeman where we were going. He said, "Do me a favour, don't stop again. Just keep going."
Right.
Because we must have looked like, country hillbillies coming from mid-Wales with my one suitcase, one overcoat, going to these digs in Didsbury, and I had to share with a chap called Philip Jones, who was also another singer, going to Gwilym as well for singing lessons. We'd never met, and a room, 2 single beds in it, and that was it.
So when you were growing up, did you have any sort of an influence in your life in terms of like a well-known singer or somebody who had left your part of Wales and become a success or made a career out of it?
Well, yeah, I mean, people like Stuart Burrows, when I was a kid, a man, a youngster, a teenager, really. He was very, very famous. And he came to Newtown to do a concert at the Powys Eisteddfod. And my father and I went to hear his concert, and he forgot his words in the middle of the concert. And I was competing the next day, and I did exactly the same thing. The adjudicator said, "Don't worry, Philip," he said, "somebody much more famous than you did exactly the same thing last night. Don't you worry about it."
But they run a Stuart Burrows competition still, don't they? Or
I don't know,
in his name,
actually.
I think so.
Oh, do they?
I think there's a competition that runs maybe in South Wales.
Right.
I've heard of people applying.
Well, he was a wonderful singer. I mean, just beautiful. And of course, there's Ryland Davis. He was another famous singer. He went to Manchester as well. He was from Loughor in Swansea. And a rugby player. But, he was poached and went into the business and had made a very famous name for himself. And he teaches at the academy now.
So what was it like at Manchester in those years that you were there?
I loved it. I mean, it was just music all the time. And,
What type of music was it? Was it opera?
All classical.
Right.
All classical. They tried to get me to do some musical theatre stuff, but of course, musical theatre, if you were starting to do a bit of that, you weren't serious about it all. You need to keep on this opera course, mate, because that's the serious stuff. That's what you're here for. And that's what I did. And then of course, the opera companies used to come to Manchester, to the Royal College of Music, to audition us. We didn't have to go to them. They came to us because Manchester had such a name for itself. And, of course, my next part of my life happened there.
Were you aware of the opera companies around the UK?
Oh, yes.
You were?
Yes, yeah, absolutely. I mean, when I was a student, I used to always go and see whatever opera company came to Manchester, because the Opera House in Manchester used to get all the big companies. The Welsh National used to come, English National Opera, Glyndebourne used to come there. They all came, and we all went as students and stood at the back to witness these singers. And in fact, when one of the operas that Glyndebourne were doing, Ryland was supposed to have been singing one of the lead roles, but for some reason or other, he wasn't going to be doing it. So they asked another Welsh singer, Kenneth Bowen, if he would step in. And I happened to go to this practice room that they were on, because I knew they were there. And it was a round hole in the door. And I was looking through, and Kenneth saw me, and he said, come in. So I went in, and I was so privileged to actually go and watch a professional company like Glyndebourne in rehearsal. And of course, that whets my appetite even more.
What was your year like? Because I think everybody that goes through drama school, you audition, you get in, and then you're thrown into a room with 20, 30 people. How many were in your year?
Singers, because there was instrumentalists as well, obviously, but as the singer group, there was probably only about 15 of us.
Right.
And of course, we had to do all sorts of elocution stuff, speech lessons.
Did they give you any sort of guidance or hint that you would work? Because there's this, you get into drama school or a college and you hope to work, but there's very little, I think, in terms of going to a drama school where they give you advice or any sort of instruction of how to go about getting a job, how to work. It seems that Manchester were a little bit more on top of that game in terms of inviting did they invite the casting directors or the casting department of those companies?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, they used to come.
So they would watch your final shows, or
no, they just came and held auditions.
Right.
I don't know whether they came to see performances. If
did
they
you
did, we
do
didn't.
shows? Did you do fine?
I did nothing. Seriously, I did absolutely nothing, because I was so young that the other singers were so much older than me. They got all the parts in the operas. I did absolutely nothing there.
So, right. So in terms of, they announce like an end of term opera or show, and then they dish out the roles, and you didn't get a role.
No.
Did that? Was that tough?
The only thing I did, and anybody listening to this that knows the operas, there's an opera called Peter Grimes by Benjamin Britten, and there's the rector in it. It is a tiny, tiny little part. But I did that. That was the only part that I ever did. And we took it to Germany. We did it in Dortmund and Iserlohn.
Is this still part of Manchester?
Yeah, this was college. And it was a guy called Colin Jones who conducted the Rosemale Voice Choir. He was there. And for some reason or other, he'd got contacts over in Germany. And they invited the college to go over. So that was the only bit of real experience I got.
So how did you feel when were you just not in college? Were you not getting the roles that you wanted to get, or have a?
I wasn't ready to do.
You wasn't ready.
I wasn't ready to.
Because I know people who have sort of trained in opera, and they are in training for years, 7, 8 years. Some people, based on sometimes where your voice ready, and no, it's not ready yet, So,
but the operas that Manchester did were extremely ambitious. Even for, experienced older people, but not experienced at performing. A lot of them had come from the Eisteddfod platform, so they hadn't done any, apart from standing on a stage and singing an aria. As far as acting and singing and watching a conductor, etc., etc. But they did the very first opera that I did when I was there, and that was building the set, was Valkyrie by Wagner. We did Meistersingers by Wagner. We did Lohengrin by Wagner. We did Falstaff by Verdi. Huge operas. Capuletti Montecchi by Bellini. They're huge. There's no way on God's earth that I would be able to sing anything in any of those. So I was just in the chorus, really.
Right. So what was you graduated from Manchester?
Well, I graduated, I left.
Right.
I came away with absolutely nothing, apart from 5 years' experience of singing.
Did you go back and forth to Wales? do
all
with
the time.
Eisteddfod in that period you were at Manchester?
well,
or did you not really compete while you were there?
they frowned upon it in the Eisteddfod if you were then taken on as, they saw you as a professional. If you'd gone to a music college, you were then considered to be professional, and the people that were competing were really amateurs. So they didn't like these people encroaching on that.
So what was your break to leave?
Glyndebourne coming there to Manchester, saying they were coming, and I put my name on the list to be heard. And I got heard, and I received a letter to say that they'd like to hear...
What did you
sing? Basilio's aria from The Marriage of Figaro and Valletto's aria from The Coronation of Poppaea by Monteverdi.
So were they your sort of golden audition pieces?
I was going to a singing teacher then called Vera Roja. She'd never taught a tenor before, and I wanted to go and have singing lessons with her because she was just fantastic.
Did they match you with a singing teacher that they thought would work for you?
After William died, you see, very suddenly. But they were going to match me with somebody that I really didn't think was
right
suitable.
for you.
No, absolutely. And I went to hear this Vera Roja doing a lunchtime recital and watching her work, because she's Hungarian. She came over to this country in 1956, the Budapest Rising time, of Hungary Rising.
Right.
And she'd spent a lot of time in, like, camps, not British, what do you call them? Prisoner of war type camps, so it affected her breathing terribly. But she'd really had to work on her frame to support it. So I watched this and I thought, that's what I need to support. You know, that's really good. So I asked her if she would teach me, and she said, "Well, darling, I've never taught a tenor." But she said, "You're young. We can learn together," and that's what we did. And she was brilliant, absolutely marvellous. But she used to pick really interesting pieces to do for auditions, stuff that you wouldn't normally think about, but it showed the voice off, and that's all you needed. And she chose pieces for me to do for Glyndebourne that Glyndebourne Opera would put on. They'd always do a Marriage of Figaro. They would always do a Monteverdi piece.
So her knowledge of the industry was really helpful in terms of guiding you in your rep.
Absolutely.
What pieces to avoid, what pieces to do.
That's right, yeah.
So you did an audition for Glyndebourne at Manchester.
At Manchester. And I have received a letter.
What are they like? What are those type of auditions like?
Nerve-wracking,
right.
Because it's very much them and you.
Is it a big panel?
3, possibly, people, maximum. You get your in-house conductor, you get your production administrator and your company manager. That's all that would be there.
Right.
And there'd be a repetiteur, an accompanist from the company as well, who would put in their 6 pennyworth.
And this is to join the company,
yes.
Not to do a production. It's to join
in the company.
Let's say the 2020 company.
That's right.
And within there, you get cast in roles or.
Glyndebourne do 5 operas in a season, in the festival, and then they do 3 or 4 operas that go out on tour, and some of those operas in the season are televised. But yes, I received a letter to say, "Thank you very much for coming to sing. We'd like to hear you again in London this time." Now, my head was like in the clouds thinking, oh my God, I had done such a brilliant audition. They're going to give me the earth. Because everybody said to me in Manchester, Glyndebourne will really suit you.
Well, why was that?
Why was that? Because of my physique, my youth, because I was so much younger than the others.
It was a young company.
A very young company.
Right.
They're all undergraduates, postgraduates, coming from companies from
still.
Yes, absolutely. To this day, they take young singers, put them on the path to having careers, but they're all taken from music colleges.
Right.
So there's me thinking that I had done, brilliant. I had to go down to London to Morley College. Hideous place to sing. And Jean Mallandane, who was the repetiteur working that day, said to me now, she said, "They weren't terribly happy with you. They want to hear you again. Are you going to sing the same pieces?" I said, "Yeah." "Right, fine. Well, this time just remember." And I thought, this is really good to go in.
Did she give you any sort of hints of what they didn't like?
No, nothing at all. She just said they weren't terribly happy.
Right.
With what? But she said, just go in there and sell yourself a bit more, which is what I did. And she said, I came out and she said, that was much better. Then I received another letter to say I was on a reserve list, because obviously they'd taken people for the next season. This was 1972. And you put on this reserve list. Now, being a tenor, there's always a chance that there's going to be an opening. better than, say, a soprano or a baritone.
Right.
But a tenors, mezzos, and those sort of voices are always a bit more available for jobs.
What, because there's more roles for
it's
those?
just that there's not that many people out there that are probably good enough.
Right.
You know, you need to have a certain standard to...
And a range, I suppose.
Exactly. So the third letter came to say that I was in the chorus of Macbeth, which was one of the productions they were doing that year by Verdi. And another letter the following week to say I was in all the operas. Of all the operas they were doing that season, plus the tour, plus 2 television operas.
So you went from the reserve list to only doing Macbeth.
Yes.
Then to doing all the productions.
All the productions, plus the tour.
Plus the tour.
Plus the television recordings, plus the proms.
So somebody dropped out.
Somebody had dropped out good and proper.
Do you know who it was?
I have no idea.
Well, cheers to them.
Yes, exactly. I never wanted to know Bach.
Right.
I was so lucky. But you see, my perseverance was absolutely playing a very important part in this because I wasn't going to be put off.
Yeah, and I think, obviously, as I've got to know you over the last few years, perseverance is something that tends to come up in different scenarios in your life all the time. And I think it's one of those qualities, and the reason why we're doing these podcasts really is to hopefully show that everybody has to have that instinct and that quality to be able to maintain and also overcome hurdles.
Yes,
like
exactly.
the fact that to get a knockback before you enter a room in terms of they weren't happy with you, I probably would have gone to absolute pieces and probably would have done a worst audition, I think. But I think to be able to pick yourself up, dust yourself off, go in there and give it.
But you see, I think that's where the Eisteddfod platform helped enormously because one day...
All the way back when you were 5.
Absolutely, when you were 5. You know, you can go... And I went to Eisteddfod the length and breadth of Wales. My father didn't think twice about taking me anywhere to sing. And some adjudicators really liked my voice and gave me first prize. Others were not that keen, and I didn't win. You have to learn to take rejection. You know what I mean?
Well, I do, yeah. Well, obviously, being Welsh, I've done my fair share of eisteddfods in all capacities, piano playing, and I'm literally like Les Dawson, but I thought I was, amazing, like Liberace.
All right.
But I did find that the eisteddfod, you've got some really pushy parents on the side, and you go, they're
Absolutely.
really getting in there, and they're giving it all beans.
In the days when I was doing it, so many people, the competition was huge because, there was no other entertainment really. Concerts, cinema possibly, yes, but eisteddfods were the main thing, and they used to go on. They'd start at 10 o'clock in the morning. They'd still be on. Some of the eisteddfods, the choirs, are still doing it at midnight. They're huge. And when you walked into the prelim, which are normally held in a chapel somewhere, and you can see all these parents sitting there with their kids, and you'd think, and my mother and father just would sit at the back. They never went into the middle or sat in the front.
Like my parents.
Right at the back. And if you can't see me, that's all the better.
And my mother would usually say something like, you weren't very good then. You were.
Actually, you mentioned playing the piano. When my voice broke, because when I was about 13 or 14, I did an eisteddfod in Carmarthen, and is a very, very famous soprano, Isabel Bailey, of my mother's era, who used to do huge concerts. She was wonderful. With Kathleen Ferrer, she and Kathleen Ferrer did duets together. And Roy Bahana, who was the head of the Welsh Arts Council in Cardiff, they were adjudicating. And they called me over after I'd sung, and they said, no, we've got to tell you something now, but you're not to tell anybody else. But you're going to win this competition. And you've got to promise us that you'll never sing another note as a boy soprano because your voice is beginning to show signs of breaking. And so I did. I stopped singing totally. And I did the piano instead. I competed doing the piano at eisteddfods.
Did you win?
Yeah, I won some, yes. In fact, I won a couple of competitions because I was far less ambitious than anybody else. And I played something like Für Elise by Beethoven.
Right.
And one adjudicator said, you see, he's chosen a piece that he actually can play, whereas some of them were playing Schubert's Impromptu, which is a beautiful piece of music, but it's really difficult. I tried to learn to play it, but I was missing half the notes out.
Right.
So, I did do competing in piano when I wasn't singing.
So you do think that the Eisteddfods certainly give you perseverance to just, next weekend it's in somewhere else, let's go, let's see what happens.
Definitely.
And were you singing different pieces?
All the time.
Right. So you're exercising your rep all the time.
All the time.
It's kind
and
of
learning
like
stuff.
a free rep session that you have to learn a new piece. They don't provide pieces, right? They don't say, well, the pieces for this competition is XYZ.
What they do is they put in the programme, the competition piece is this. It's a chosen piece. For instance, Osbydd Mwynhad, which is by Gounod, it's actually from the opera Faust. It's one of the arias. But that was one of my favourite pieces. Now, if it was an own selection, I'd either sing that or a piece called Sei Huboro, which is Voi che sapete. It's Cherubino's aria from Figaro. But I had my favourite pieces, but mainly they were chosen, so you had to learn them. And there was one competition I did. They chose My Mother Bids Me Bind My Hair. It was under 18, and that was the chosen piece. And I thought, well, if that's the chosen piece, I'm going to sing it. And a couple of girls that were actually thinking, he's never going to sing this. And I didn't win.
What was it? High?
It's just that My Mother Bids Me Bind My Hair with. It's a girl's song,
right?
But they chose it thinking there probably wouldn't be any boys competing.
Right.
There was me.
You. So obviously you got into Glyndebourne.
Mm-hmm.
You started the season with Macbeth.
Mm-hmm.
So what is that like? So you leave Manchester without graduating.
Absolutely. I didn't.
So was that something, were they supportive of that?
Who?
The college? Were your parents, did your parents say?
My parents didn't realise, they didn't understand.
Right.
I mean, as far as they was concerned, I had been in college for 5 years.
Earning money?
Well, I hadn't earned anything while I was in college.
No,
they
but
were
of course.
they were paying for me as well because I was always short of money. They were always sending me money in the post. But then I said I'd got into Glyndebourne, which was a paid job. Sigh of relief.
So what was the early days at Glyndebourne like?
It was absolutely amazing.
Who was directing Macbeth?
A Russian director called Michael Hadjimischiff. He did that, and he did The Queen of Spades there. He did Onegin there. Wonderful man.
Were you aware of him as a director?
I didn't know of him before. No, not at all. The only director I really knew there was Peter Hall, obviously, because he was doing opera there.
Did he direct a lot of the productions that you did early on?
Yes, he did. Ulysses, Callisto, Figaro.
Was that in the first year?
No, several years.
Several years on.
Yeah.
So what was it? You did Macbeth. What were you doing in Macbeth?
Chorus.
Right. So for people who don't know, what? Let's give the definition of what the chorus is and what does that mean?
Right. So in this particular opera, Macbeth, it's a big opera and it needs a big chorus of singers. So I was one of 46 people. So say there'd be 12 tenors, 12 baritones, 12 mezzos, 12 sopranos. But it needs a big chorus. It's a huge opera to do. But that's what I was. I was one of 46 people.
You're on stage?
Yes, absolutely.
When you say a chorus, are you a character? Are you one of the witches? Are you a chorus of witches? Are you a chorus of soldiers? Are you Well,
we were more soldiers in Macbeth, but we were also courtesans as well. Susan, my wife, she was also Susanna Ross. She worked under the name Susanna Ross. She worked at Glyndebourne as well. We were students together. We got married in 1972, the year we went to Glyndebourne. 1972 was a very important year.
Students in Manchester together?
Yes. We met there.
So you met, right. And your first job was together at Glyndebourne?
Well, Susan won 2 major competitions to go to the Opera Centre.
That put her on the map.
Absolutely.
Is that Opera Centre National Opera Studio now?
That's what it was then.
Right.
And then she went to Glyndebourne in 1971 just to do The Queen of Spades with Michael Hadjimischiff directing. So she did a year before me there. But then we both went to do Macbeth in 72.
And you were both in the chorus?
And we were both in the chorus. She was one of the witches.
All right, I see.
With Delmy Bryn Jones.
So you can do...
No, not Delmy Bryn Jones. What was his name?
Who played Macbeth?
Yeah, he played Macbeth. He was a Welsh singer. I can't remember his name.
Were there a lot of Welsh singers at Glyndebourne when you started?
Oh, yes. There were a lot of Welsh people coming from the London colleges as well. Not everybody went to Manchester. They all went to the Royal College, the Academy. There was people from Scottish Academy as well coming down. and some from Welsh. Actually, not that many from the college in Wales, I must say. They were mainly from London colleges.
So you're in the chorus. Are you in the chorus for all the productions you did in the first year?
There was only one opera that didn't require a chorus, and that was Ariadne auf Naxos by Strauss.
So what did you do then?
Nothing. I wasn't in that.
Right.
It was a freebie.
So when you get into the chorus, do you then have ambitions to go, right, I now need to get to the next level in terms of, how it works? So what is the next level in terms of chorus?
My first year was just doing the chorus. I wasn't doing any covering or anything at all. I was just in the operas that I was supposed to be in.
But learning a lot, right?
Oh,
you're in the rehearsal room all the time?
All the time.
Watching?
Absolutely. And the rehearsal facilities at Glyndebourne are just fantastic.
Do you still get singing lessons? Do you have singing lessons while they're one-to-one?
One-to-one, but not at Glyndebourne. I had to come up to London for those.
You had to pay for those yourself?
Yeah, I was still going to Vera Roja for those.
Right. They don't have any sort of like a training ground to nothing.
You're on your own. Right. You're on your own. You're earning money and you're paying for your own lessons.
So if they give you an opera in a language that you aren't familiar with, what happens then?
Well, we got very good training in Manchester of Italian, French and German.
Right.
So I had a grounding before I went there. But then you do have very good coaches at Glyndebourne who teach you as a chorus. They don't teach you on a one-to-one. It's as a chorus. So, for instance, doing Macbeth, you go through it with Ubaldo Gardini, was the Italian coach. You do it all with him. And then when we did Russian, of course, I hadn't done Russian in Manchester. That was a new one. But it was all done phonetically, so it's very easy to pick up. You just imagine you're North Walian.
Right.
You talk like that.
So your chorus, when was the sort of shift for you in terms of Glyndebourne?
Well, once you've done your first year chorus, there's a chance to audition again for them, because you don't automatically go in year. You have to audition every year, and depending
your contract is only for that season.
Only for that season. Tour, television, prom, and then it comes to an end.
Was the money good?
No, terrible. I mean, seriously, we're all young singers coming from colleges. It's the first money we're earning, so they know that they've got us cheap. But that's not what we do it for. You go to Glyndebourne because the preparation, the costumes, the sets are all amazing. And you're in this beautiful Elizabethan house with an opera house attached to it in the middle of the Sussex countryside. It's idyllic.
I've never been, but I've always wanted to go.
It's idyllic. Absolutely. So then whatever the operas they're doing next year, in the next season, they announce those towards the end. You can see if there's something that you'd like to be considered for. Not necessarily for a part, because they like to get those people from outside, and a lot of foreign artists come over to Glyndebourne. But for understudying purposes, or like we did one opera called Capriccio by Strauss, beautiful opera, and there's lots of lackeys in it, and they all have solo lines. So that was one thing to go for, and I got one of those, and it was recorded for BBC. Another opera we did was The Visit of the Old Lady by von Einem. Now, the first year, I understudied the part of the son in it. The second year we did it, I did the part. So that was in my third year there.
So if you are in the chorus, do you understudy as well?
Yes.
So it's no different to what we do at Phantom now,
That's
where
right.
we're in the ensemble, it's called, but we understudy some of the bigger roles.
Yeah.
So were you understudying anything in your first year?
Yes, I was understudying the son. Not in the first year, no. Sorry, the first year it wasn't. It was, I can't remember, it was 1973. I think we did The Visit of the Old Lady.
Right.
So I understudied the boy.
That was your first understudy position?
Yes, that's right. So you get understudy rehearsal. Not many, I hasten to add. You're expected to go out and watch. That was the rule of the day there. And then they were doing that opera the next year, and they offered me the part in it, yeah.
So there was a sort of slight progression. Are they helpful? Do they come to you saying, Philip, you should maybe be looking to, understudy this role or do this, and give you a slight hint along the way?
Sometimes when because they've watched you for your first year. They've heard you at your audition. They know that you're a tenor. They know what your voice is capable of doing. They then watch you in rehearsal as the chorus, see how you work with other people, because it's all teamwork, to see if you've got that thing that you can meld into things or that you stand out for doing something. They're watching you all the time. So then they will come and say, look, we're doing this next year. We'd like to see if you'd be interested in auditioning for it. They don't just offer it to you. They audition for it.
So what was it like going from the chorus to be in the understudy, and then when they revised that production the following year to be playing the role? Is it a big role?
No, it wasn't a big role, but it was a great role. I had to drive a car off stage.
Right.
It was a Ford Escort, because what the opera story is, it's a very down at heel town, German town, and this woman comes back and she pours money into it. Absolutely pours money. It's the visit of the old lady, and she's very, very rich, and we all become really affluent.
I think they're just doing a play version of it at the National now, called The Visit.
Yeah, probably.
And this sounds familiar.
Yeah, it's a brilliant. I loved the opera, and the son is able to buy a car. So he drives the car on. One night, I put the hazard lights on as well, because I went off in a flash. It was flash.
You were drawing attention
Yes,
to
absolutely.
yourself.
I had to reverse it off as well, down this ramp.
So you did that. Can you remember? Critics come in to review the productions, right? Mm-hmm. Can you remember if anyone wrote anything specific about you?
I never did anything that was worthy of a critic pointing out, because things were so small that I did. You would never sort of mention it, really.
So how many years did you do at Glyndebourne?
6.
6 years. What was the biggest role you played?
Well, probably the son in the Visit of the Lady, because after that, they used to have a saying at Glyndebourne that 3 years was the maximum you should do, then you should go away and
to another
do something
company.
else and do something else. We had decided we liked living down here. We'd got married. We hadn't got any family, but we were married, and we just liked living here. I found the country air down here much healthier than I did when I was up in Manchester, because Manchester was also smoggy. Having come from Wales, to clean air in Wales, to that, back down to Sussex, feeling healthy again. So we decided to stay here. But they did offer me another 3 years after the 3 temporary years at the beginning.
And you stayed?
I stayed, yeah.
And doing similar work?
It got to the point where it was only chorus stuff. I wasn't getting the opportunity to do anything. No, they were keeping those roles for new people coming in. It's the carrot to dangle people in,
Did you find that frustrating?
A little bit, but then Susan's career was on the up, and
Susan doing more leading roles?
Yes, because she'd got a contract at Covent Garden as well, and Scottish Opera, so she was doing a lot, and she'd been to Wexford, and we were doing this as a team. It wasn't her and me.
You didn't feel like you were competing against?
Oh no,
never
at all. We've always had joint bank accounts. Everything's gone into one firm.
So you celebrate each other's victories and successes, and well, that's healthy, isn't it? Because they do say that 2 actors or 2 singers should never get married together.
Well, we had a completely different outlook on it.
Right.
And as far as we were concerned, if she was getting the work, that was brilliant.
That was good for the both of you.
Absolutely.
For
absolutely.
you and building
But I was working with other companies as well during Glyndebourne. I worked for Kent Opera, Dublin Grand Opera Company, the New Opera. I did other things.
So what was it like? What were other companies like compared to Glyndebourne?
Oh, Kent Opera was lovely. I did some nice work with Kent Opera. Did some good parts.
Kent Opera doesn't...
It doesn't function anymore, unfortunately.
So where did they perform?
The Marlow Theatre in Canterbury.
Right.
The Assembly Rooms in Tunbridge Wells. The Congress Theatre in Eastbourne. It was all Kent, Sussex based, but they did really, really good productions. Roger Norrington was their #1 conductor, and a guy called Norman Platt started the company, but Jonathan Miller directed for them. We did a few productions with Jonathan. They were wonderful. I loved it.
So, obviously we've discussed this before, but you arrived at a crossroads in your career, sort of bridging between the opera work that you were doing and then moving into musical theatre, or at the time you used to say commercial theatre. Who advised you that would maybe be the better option for you?
Well, as I say, I got to my 6th year, and I was just going in and doing it.
It became a job.
It became a job, exactly. And one of the directors there, he was the head of productions, is a guy called John Cox. And he'd done several productions that I'd done. In fact, he did the Capriccio that I did one of the lackeys in. And it was televised, as I say. And he was just a wonderful conductor. He did Rake's Progress. He did masses of stuff because we had a courtyard at Glyndebourne where we used to eat and we'd have coffee and all the rest of it. A beautiful courtyard. And he came in and he was a very erect man. You'd swear he'd been a dancer. And as he passed my table, he said, "I need to talk to you." And I thought, you immediately think, oh God, what have I done now? And he'd never actually given me any sort of telling off. He could be absolutely cutting. I've seen him absolutely delve into people.
Did you have a relationship with him? Or
yeah, absolutely.
You did?
I mean, he used to work well with me, or I worked well with him. He always used to use me for things because he just liked what I did. And so when he said that to me, I was a bit sort of, oh God, what have I done? So I saw him and he said, "Come on, we need to have a chat." He said, "Look," he said, "I think you're wasting your time doing this." He said, "I think you should do commercial theatre." And I was completely, oh my God. It deflated me completely. And I said, "But I don't know anybody in commercial theatre." He said, No. What I'm going to do is, if you are prepared to take the chance, I'll introduce you to somebody that will help you along the way. Right?
So he was essentially saying you're not going to have the sort of career or the roles or the path that you want in opera, but you may have an opportunity to play bigger roles in musical theatre.
Yeah, exactly. Because you see, I am a realist. I've always been a realist. And I knew, having been at Glyndebourne for 6 years, and I'd listened to these tenors singing the roles that I would dearly love to sing. And I just knew. I knew that it was never going to happen because my voice is not big enough, strong enough, whatever.
So
I don't have the range.
They wanted really. Would you say you've got a lighter tenor voice?
Because there's the lyric tenor voice, which is the sort of the lead roles, but then there's what's known as the compromario roles, which is Basilio, Curzio, Monostatos.
So they're the roles that you could have done.
Yes, but I wasn't prepared.
You didn't want to do those roles.
I wasn't interested in them.
Right.
I have done them. But having done them, I know what they're like. No, thank you very much. I did Monostatos and Basilio for Kent Opera, so I had a good chance to get to grips with the parts.
With the roles that you probably would be playing, but
yes.
Were you always hankering after the other roles?
Yes, always. I covered them. I covered the lead roles, but I wish to God that I never had to go on because I knew it wouldn't be good for me or the role.
Right.
So John Cox gave me the name of an agent, Mairet Morvan from Fraser and Dunlop, a big agency on Regent Street in London. And he said, "Now I want you to contact her and I want you to tell her that I have sent you to her and to see what she can do." So I rang her from the telephone.
Straight away?
Yeah. I thought, I'm not wasting any time.
Perseverance.
Yeah, absolutely. I wasn't going to waste any time. So I rang her and I spoke to her. She was a very nice, charming lady on the phone, very businesslike, very experienced. And she said, so I told her about myself. I said, I'm Welsh, I'm dark, I'm a tenor. "Right, darling," she said. "So would you be free to go to New York to do Freddie in My Fair Lady with Richard Harris? No, Rex Harrison? And I went, "Really?" "Yes, darling," she said. I said, "But you haven't seen me." She said, "No, that's fine. If John Cox has recommended you, you'll be fine." So I said, "Okay, thank you." Right. Yeah, I said, "I'd love to."
Did you think, my God, that's easy?
Yeah,
Only
too
made
easy.
one phone call, I'm off to New York.
Absolutely. So I rang Susan. As soon as I'd finished talking to her, I rang Susan, who was at home. And I said, "Mairet Morvan wants me to go to New York to do Freddie, My Fair Lady." And she said, "That can't be right." "It can't be." She said, "She hasn't seen you. She doesn't know you." I said, "I know." She said, "I think you ought to make an appointment to go and meet her at least. Go and meet her and have a chat." So I had a free day coming up, or I applied for a free day, went up to London, went to the office, and she opened it. It was a glass door. And she came to the door and I could see her through it going, "What?" And she said, "Are you Philip Griffiths?" I said, "Yes." She said, "But you're not blonde and blue-eyed." I said, "I told you what I looked like on the phone." "Oh, well, you won't do at all." Oh, God, I can imagine Rex Anderson having an absolute fit if he saw me. So we sat down for 3/4 of an hour and she told me what her other clients were doing.
All right.
And I could feel myself frizzling up to nothing. She then wanted me to go to South Africa to do Henrik in A Little Night Music. And she said, do you play the cello? I said, no, I don't. But she said, well, you're an actor. You'll be able to fod that off, won't you? Somebody can play to the pit. So I said, okay, yes, that would be a nice part to do, I think. Not that I knew anything about it. Anyway, that all fell through because at the time there was a lot of trouble in South Africa and there was apartheid, etc., etc. So I never got to do that.
So were you set to do it? Was it all you were going to do it?
I was going to do it, but then it all fell through.
Right.
It all just fell through because of problems over there. So that was that, and that didn't work out.
So did you sign with her?
No. She got me audition for Evita. Hal Prince was looking for somebody to take over the part of Magaldi in Evita, and she put me up for it.
Were you aware of Evita and the sort of musical theatre scene in the West End at that time? No, you had no idea.
No idea at all.
So when somebody said Hal Prince wants to see you for an audition, were you thinking, who's Hal Prince?
Exactly what I was thinking. Right. So I went along to this audition, because I did the first round for it, and they recalled me. David Caddick, who was then the musical director, and he's done masses of Andrew Lloyd Webber shows. He was actually auditioning me, and he said, right, we'll get you back to sing for Hal. So I told Mirette, and she said, well, I'll be there because I know Hal very well.
This was the agent?
Yes, the agent. And she said, I'll be there watching you. And they gave me On This Night of 1,000 Stars to go away and learn and come back. There was a microphone put in front of me, and I had to sing into this mic.
Was it easy?
No, it was
Is it a hard song? I mean, in terms of the rep that you had spent the last 6 years doing, when you're given this... were you thinking, this is easy for me?
It was a walk in the park.
Right,
Seriously, vocally a walk in the park.
Right.
And of course, you're putting a whole different style on it as well. You're not doing the operatic sing. You're actually singing in a musical theatre type.
So did you adapt to that quite easily?
I think so, yes, because in those days, I mean, we're talking about 1980, there weren't that many opera singers that were going into musical theatre.
Right, which sort of musical theatre term for sort of a slightly operatic, slightly is a legit sound.
Yes,
we call
that's
it
right, a legit sound, that's right.
So they weren't... Is that essentially what you were?
Yeah,
right,
absolutely.
So you did the audition in front of Hal Prince.
Yes.
What was he like?
He was lovely. He didn't say much. Right. I mean, Hal never says to me, right, yeah, just great. Yeah. Next.
Did he have his glasses on his head?
Glasses on the top of his head. And I could see Mirette was sitting at the back. This is the Prince Edward Theatre, and it's a big theatre, and she was sitting at the back. And it didn't go well because I got out with the piano. I was so nervous. And I just got out with it, and David Caddick said, "You got out there, Philip, and I don't think it's going to work. But anyway, thank you for coming to sing for us." So I saw Mirette afterwards. She said, "What did you wear for your first audition?" I said, "I can't remember." She said, "You weren't wearing the same clothes today, then?" I said, "No, I don't think so." And she said, "Well, that's where you went wrong." She said, "What they saw the first time, they liked. So you should have been wearing the same clothes." I said, "Well, I didn't know that." So now,
is that because I don't know where that superstition came for me, but if I go into an audition, I have to wear exactly the same thing, down to the same socks,
absolutely,
same shoes, everything.
Yeah,
because
absolutely.
I think if I come in something that doesn't make me look slim or same, I just think, I'll instantly go to, I should have worn the same thing. Mm-hmm. Well, so was that something you adopted in other auditions?
Ever since.
Right.
Ever since. And I've passed that on. The teaching I've done, I've always passed it on to other people. Whatever you take, but you must look right. That first audition, you just don't stick any old thing on. You've got to look at what you're auditioning for. Go with an idea of that they can see something.
Would you wear something that's slightly inspires the character?
Yes.
You would?
Yeah. I mean... A lot of the time, a white shirt and dark trousers works very well because it's a blank canvas. But sometimes, if you were going, for instance, when I went for Anything Goes, which is a very periody piece, collar and tie,
right,
and perhaps a waistcoat. Mm. But anything to make it look, because that's what your costume will be like when you're doing the show.
Mm. So Evita, what happened?
Well, I didn't get it.
Was this the first year that it opened?
Yes.
So it hadn't opened yet.
It had been going for about 6 months, I think.
Right.
And of course,
So this was the second cast.
Yeah, whoever was engaged didn't want to do any longer. They'd done enough. They'd done the album. They'd done as much as they were going to do and got the fame out of it. So they were going to move on to other things. Which was a guy called Mark Ryan, I think his name was. Anyway, so I
did
didn't
you get
it.
an agent?
Eventually, I had to shop around. I looked in the stage.
Why
in the
didn't
end.
you sign with the other agent? Did you just think too big?
Too big.
You were just a number.
Absolutely. And it was quite obvious
work that out, or did somebody advise you?
No, I worked it out. I mean, I didn't want them to be rude to me. I thought, I'm going to back out of here while I'm still got... I can hold my head up high. But then I looked in the stage, and there was this woman called Mildred Challenger of the Encore Agency. She was advertising in there. And I thought, And it was in Denmark Street, up a grotty pair of stairs. But she took me on, and she worked really hard. I mean, she started, the minute I went in that room, she was making phone calls. And she rang down to a guy called Barry Stacey, who did pantomimes everywhere. And she said she fixed an audition up, just like that.
And you just done 6 years at Glyndebourne. The roles that you wanted didn't quite work out. Were you picky? Or was it just a case of, I will do anything right now just to experience this side of the industry?
Absolutely.
Because to go from, panto is obviously big business, but not something that you probably are aware of pantomimes, but never been in one.
I've never seen one.
Or you've never seen one?
No.
Far different from doing a production at Glyndebourne of Macbeth
absolutely.
or Othello.
I mean, this audition for my first pantomime for Barry Stacey.
So was this your first job in musical theatre
Yes.
or commercial theatre?
Absolutely.
Was the panto?
I was still at Glyndebourne while I'm doing all this. This is still happening while I'm there, because I didn't want to go be unemployed, so I wanted to overlap.
Did you talk openly about with
I didn't
people
tell
at
anybody.
You didn't tell anybody?
No, absolutely. I learned my lesson. I don't talk about it at all. I just go and do it. When I've got it, then I'll talk about it. But this audition, it was in the Concert Artists Association. And I arrived at the place, and there were hundreds of people. And no organisation at all, apart from one poor guy with a clipboard. So I went up and I said, I'm Philip Griffiths. He said, oh, yeah, okay. You just hang on, really. Just hang on. So I eventually got in, and I sang on This Night of 1,000 Stars, which is from Evita.
Did that become your golden audition piece?
It was my audition piece, exactly. I loved it, because it was great for the voice. It really suited me. And I got inside, and there were several tables with about 3 or 4 or 5 people sitting around them. And this one guy going from table to table, talking to everyone. I thought, what on earth is going on? And he had to stand on this stage, which was a real amateur-type stage, if you imagine, with drapes and thing and all the rest of it. And while I was singing, he was walking around talking to people. I thought, this is incredibly rude. Anyway, I finished, and they said, thank you very much. Could you just go and wait outside? Somebody come and talk to you in a minute. So somebody came out and said, actually, can you hang on? Because they want you to read with one of the girls that has been auditioning. They'd like to see you two read together. So they gave me some script, and I met, whatever her name was, Maggie, and we read it together, and we went in together, and it was a great laugh. And I said, can you explain to me what is going on in there? What are these teams? Oh, those are the different pantomimes around the country that Barry is fixing. So they're all the different production teams, and they're bidding for you. So somebody will say, yeah, we'd really like him as our principal, because not everybody had a boy playing principal boy. They'd like girls doing it. But in this
that's what the walking around was all about.
He was just trying to find out who would like me as their principal boy. And the people said, no, we're going to have a girl doing it. We're going to have 2 girls. We're going to keep to tradition. But some like to be adventurous. We'll have a guy doing it. So I went off to New Brighton and the Floral Pavilion to do Puss in Boots. And I was Colin in Puss in Boots, my first pantomime. It was absolutely fantastic.